Joining you here tonight in the studio, it's Ian.
And Chris.
And joining us remotely. Are you there, sir?
Nobody's here.
Nobody is here. Calling in tonight due to some unusual circumstances here in the studio. We won't dig deeper into that, but glad to have you, even though it is at a remote location. And there's, of course, lots in the news to talk about, as always. Alex Jones is back in court. We mentioned this, I think, last week, that after losing a pretty big civil case, and that was down in Texas, they hit him with something like a $50 million settlement in that case. The situation was the Sandy Hook in Connecticut. Sandy Hook, he said some stuff on the air some people didn't like. It hurt their feelings. And so they claim they've been harassed by Jones's supporters, these families, because Jones said that Sandy Hook didn't actually happen, basically, was kind of what he said on the air, as I understand it.
Yeah.
And apparently you can't have certain beliefs these days in the United States and go on the radio. And so they found him responsible to pay these people millions of dollars in damages. And now the rumor I heard was that there's some sort of Texas law that limits the payouts. So even though he got hit with $45 million in so-called damages, he could only, because there's only two families or whatever that were in that case, there's a limit as far as, I think it was 1.5 million or 750,000. There's some sort of cap, supposedly. I have not seen any validation of that claim.
I have to wonder, for what exactly? I mean, $1 million because you made somebody feel bad? I mean,
go ahead, nobody.
I always thought it was crazy that he said that these things were all that they were all faked, because he obviously doesn't understand the United States government. It's much easier to actually murder people than to fake it up. So why would they fake it? They have no problem murdering people.
Yeah, I've never understood it either. I mean, it definitely seems crazy, but that said, you should be able to be crazy, right? You should be free to be nuts in the USA if you have so-called freedom of speech, and that means that you should be free to ramble about whatever lunatic theory that you want to. And apparently, according to these juries, no, you're not. If somebody got their feelings hurt, these people essentially okay, it wasn't bad enough that they already lost their kids in some mass shooting, but now they claim that Jones has made that worse because he said something they didn't like. It's ridiculous.
It's kind of crazy too, because it's a minority opinion. It's not even like it's the mainstream narrative, right?
Yeah.
And the government doing it or something, you know what I mean? It's just crazy.
Well, so there's news here. So again, he's back in court. So he lost in Texas, but now he's being sued again in civil court, this time in Connecticut, where apparently, the difference between Connecticut and Texas is there's probably no limits. It's expected that he may face even greater damages in Connecticut, and as I understand it, there probably are no caps when it comes to what the payouts could be. And so he's in court this week. There's been some clips that have been posted online. The story here coming from the New York Times. In Waterbury, Connecticut, Alex Jones' initial day of testimony in a trial for damages after years of lying about the Sandy Hook shootings ended in chaos. Confronted on Thursday with the harm he had done by repeatedly lying on his InfoWars radio and online show that Robbie Parker, whose daughter Emily died in the massacre, was an actor, Jones erupted in a rant that drew a contempt threat by the judge, Barbara Bellis, of the State Superior Court. Jones responded, is this a struggle session? Are we in China? I've already said I'm sorry, and I'm done saying I'm sorry. So I guess apologizing to these people didn't work.
Yeah.
And they want to ruin him financially. Jones was set off by the lawyer for the families of the Sandy Hook victims, Chris Mattei, who pointed to Parker in the courtroom as he questioned Jones on the stand, saying, Robbie Parker's sitting right here. He's real, isn't he? And for years you put a target on his back, didn't you? Just like you did every single parent and loved one sitting here. No, I didn't, said Jones. Why don't you show a little respect, Mr. Jones, said the lawyer. You have families in this courtroom here that lost children, sisters, wives, moms.
But that had nothing to do with Alex Jones.
No.
And it's perfectly reasonable. I mean, Jones, as far as I know, never told anybody to do anything to these people.
No.
And you can't simultaneously say that these people don't exist and they should also be killed. It doesn't make sense.
At the end of the day, after the jury... the judge rebuked Jones, saying, this is not a press conference. This is clearly not your show. You have to respect the process, she says. At the end of the day, after the jury had gone, she warned Jones, as well as his lawyer, Norm... Sorry, what was that, nobody?
Penguin said why. I said because the process doesn't respect you. That's why. Yeah. And it will kill you.
In this case, it will, at the very least, financially ruin him, I suspect. This is a lot of money. I mean, already 40-something million, close to 50, I believe, in the Texas trial, and it could be even more here. She warned Jones, as well as his lawyer, Norm Pattis, that she would enforce a zero-tolerance policy Friday for ignoring her orders about decorum in the courtroom. Pattis had repeatedly objected as his client shouted, quote, you can expect a contempt hearing if anybody steps out of line, she said, and Mr. Jones, same thing, unquote. Jones for years spread lies on InfoWars. Now, is it a lie if you actually believe it?
It's not. It's an opinion anyway. It's not a. I mean, look, he stated his opinion, right? His
opinion was that it was faked,
right? And that's not necessarily a fact. It's an opinion, and that's exactly the kind of thing that's protected, by the First Amendment.
It's amazing to me that this is obviously not being protected, at least in these civil cases. Now, they are appealing the decisions in Texas, so perhaps they'll get some justice, so-called, later.
And here's the thing, Ian, that what they'd probably argue is that, well, this isn't protected. The Constitution protects you from the government, but of course, they're going to claim this isn't the government, this is a civil case.
Well, the Constitution is supposed to enshrine the idea of freedom of speech, and that should include being able to speak about somebody else.
You would think you wouldn't be able to use the government to extract money out of people who, give their opinion, certainly.
Unfortunately, there are libel laws in the United States that essentially say that if you are, and I'm not a lawyer, this isn't legal advice, but my understanding of them is that if you say a thing that damages somebody's reputation, then you have to pay out to that person, as long as they're not a public figure.
It's more detailed than that.
But that only happens when the so-called victim is popular. I guarantee I can say anything I want about Alex Jones right now over the radio, 200 radio stations. I can say he's a monster who should be killed. And guess what? Nobody's coming after me for that. Not me, the other nobody. Because nobody cares about Alex Jones. People do care about these people who obviously they suffered a terrible loss. They were victimized, but they weren't victimized by Alex Jones. They were victimized by a government that didn't protect them and by a madman who shot them.
We're coming up here in moments. The number, if you want to join the show, is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You want to weigh in on what you think of this Alex Jones situation? Maybe you are somebody who's listened to him at some point. You've actually heard the things he said. Does that make a difference? It's Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Gold and silver. You can own the most stable assets in recorded history with BullionMax.com. Buy direct from BullionMax.com without talking to a salesperson, and your precious metals shipped fully insured direct to your home. Free Talk Live can get you their silver starter kit at employee pricing. Just go to BullionMax.com/FTL. It includes 5 ounces of the most desirable silver products. This offer's limited to 1 per household, so get yours now. Go to BullionMax.com/FTL.
There are basically 2 types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Still coming up short at the supermarket? I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. You could be suffering shrinkflation. Same price, less stuff. It's not your imagination. That cereal box is skinnier. That bag of Doritos is now a half-ounce smaller, averaging 5 fewer chips per, according to Forbes, which reports that a bottle of Aleve has gone from 100 caplets to 90. Cottonelle Mega Roll toilet paper shrank from 340 sheets to 312 sheets. Is nothing sacred? Compare unit price, not item price. Those name products that are shorting you have to cover the cost of advertising that made you brand loyal, unlike store brands, which in many cases are made by the same supplier. How are you coping? Post your inflation hacks at andyoucanquoteme.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com. Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones are open. You can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. As people are going to the polls, or in some cases the polls are coming to them in the eastern area of Ukraine. We can talk about the latest in that situation. It is Ian, Chris, and Nobody here in the studio tonight. We've upgraded Nobody's audio quality, so he's with us remotely tonight. So thanks for coming in that fashion.
I'm delighted to be here, or to be virtually here.
Indeed. So we're talking about Alex Jones and the current situation that he's in down in Connecticut, where he's facing another civil trial. So he's been on trial and found, I guess they call it, what is it, responsible or something in a civil trial. It's not, you're not getting found guilty. There's another term for it. And so now he's back in court, except in Connecticut, where apparently things have already gotten heated with Jones taking the stand, I guess, earlier today. got rebuked by the judge. They say here in this New York Times article, which is just basically a hit piece against Jones, they say that he spread lies.
I noticed people have been questioning Alex Jones's sanity so vocally and so loudly for so many years, and I did it myself. I used to say Alex Jones is a lunatic because he thinks there's some billionaire pedophile out there with his own private island, and Bill Clinton, of all people, is going there. Alex Jones is completely out of his mind. But they don't even stop to ask themselves if they are persecuting a lunatic for being crazy. The story says lie uncritically over and over and over again. Everybody knows Alex Jones is crazy. So why are they saying, no, he's not crazy, he's lying, he's pretending to be crazy?
The reason is because this crazy guy has money. Right? Like,
yes, he does.
Your typical rambling, drunk lunatic on the streets, he doesn't have a dime to his name. He'd love it if you gave him $1. But this one has.
I'd love it if you gave me $1.
Yeah, this guy, who knows how much Jones has? As I understand it, he has filed bankruptcy in his company all of a sudden within recent months, and that happens to coincide with all these civil trials. So I'm sure Jones would
that could backfire on the government, because imagine if they actually pick a receiver who's more competent than Jones, which I don't think is a very high bar, and he puts that thing into high gear and turns it into $1 billion enterprise. I mean, he's done pretty well for himself, despite being, as mentioned, nuts.
Yep, that's true. Well, I mean, he's got a product that is very saleable. In fact, they say that Jones has actually done very well for himself on selling supplements. So it's really, he's done less successfully selling videos or whatever. In fact, to Jones's credit.
Have you called the supplement people, brother man? Because I think he was doing better than us.
Oh yeah, well, Jones is he's got this follower base that is just unquestioning, right? There's a lot of people who will just do whatever it is Alex Jones says. If Jones says buy, this soap product or buy these pills or whatever, he's got people that will follow his every word. We encourage independent thought.
It
right?
does, I think, some stuff called My Mud.
Oh, My Magic Mud? I don't think that. I don't even know if they're doing radio anymore. I think they're still on.
Mark Edge is still doing them. I was busting his balls.
No, I see what you're saying, but I mean, just to update our listeners on My Magic Mud, it is actually a Texas-based company. And
I'm not saying they're bad. I
like their product. I really do. It's unfortunately they went bankrupt a few years ago. I think they're still in business. Like it's one of those bankruptcies.
There's a lot of that going around these days.
Yeah, it's one of those bankruptcies you can come back from. I don't remember what chapter that is. So they're still in business, and we're still running ads for them. But that's because we like them. They're not paying us to do it. We've been running ads for them gratis for a long time. But what I was saying about Jones is he's got this personality that he's cultivated, and it is a very kind of cultish personality, if you will, in that people will do whatever it is he says, whereas we encourage independent thought. We say, don't believe what we say, do your own research. And so if we bring a product out that we like, I mean, I'm sure some people appreciate the fact that we like it, but they're going to do their own research, and that's not the same kind of. Well, I mean, I think that they will.
We've encouraged them to.
Yeah,
whether or not they do is another matter. But
yeah. So I think that's a difference between the audiences here. We don't put ourselves forward as any kind of oracle, all-knowing hosts that know the truth about everything. We're people who are trying to discover the truth. We might have some ideas about it that we'll share with you. And of course, the phones are always open here. We've even had people call in and criticize our advertisers on the show. I'm sure our advertisers don't like it when that happens, but we don't exclude any callers here. So anyway, they say that Jones spread lies on InfoWars that the December 14th, 2012 shooting that killed 20 first graders and 6 educators at Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut was a government pretext for gun control. Late last year, Jones lost 4 separate defamation lawsuits filed by the families of 10 Sandy Hook victims who had endured years of online torment and threats from conspiracy theorists who believed Jones's bogus claims.
See, he should have blamed it on MAGA Republicans, okay? Because then nobody would have come after him for that. But he blamed the government.
I mean,
blaming MAGA Republicans is much safer. You can run a MAGA Republican down in your car and get out of jail on bail the next month or the next day.
That's a fact. That actually happened, right?
I mean, it's not like that
actually happened. It's public record.
It's not like the mainstream media didn't cover the case. It did. So why is the mainstream media not being sued? I mean,
the mainstream media provided the official narrative,
right? But the whole point is like, what
official narrative unquestionably.
Just because you say something doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else, that you're responsible for what somebody else then goes and does. Especially when you're not advocating for.
That seems so obvious. Like how I would love for someone to talk to these jurors and ask them that question. Like, how could you hold this man who's simply talking into a microphone, opining about his, thoughts on this crazy situation? How can you hold him responsible for what completely unrelated people? He has no idea who's listening to his words. He cannot control who's listening to his words. He's on radio stations, for instance. How can you hold anybody responsible for the actions of some crazy person?
How would you even know that these trolls are doing it in reaction to what he said, as opposed to, I don't know, what the mainstream media said, right? Like, how do we know that even if he didn't exist, that they wouldn't have done those things anyway, because it wasn't mainstream media too?
Did they call them on the witness stand? Did they call the actual people who were harassing these families? And did they all point to Jones and say, he made me do it? I mean, what happened here? It's crazy.
What happened here is what always happens under democracy, which is some politically unpopular person got singled out and they're in the process of lynching him by inches on camera.
And this is, a lot of people call it lawfare, using the law as like warfare, attacking people and just financially ruining them. More coming up here in moments. If you want to weigh in on the Alex Jones situation, it is a tragedy for the idea of freedom of speech here in the U.S. The number is 603-283-6160. Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 15th through the 18th for the 7th annual Fork Fest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Fork Fest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which sold out in 2022. For 2023, we're going back to where it all started, the weekend before PorcFest. ForkFest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 15th through the 18th. You can find out more at the unofficial website forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the Forkfest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the Forkfest forum. You can find links to those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there June 15th through the 18th. forkfest.party.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. There's been a substantial crash in the value of sterling after the financial markets rejected a mini-budget presented by Britain's new Chancellor of the Exchequer. Kwasi Kwarteng unveiled plans for massive tax cuts to be funded by significant borrowing, with much of the benefit to be enjoyed by the wealthiest in Britain. The pound plummeted against the dollar and the FTSE lost 2% of its value. John Mills is a British businessman, economist, and entrepreneur.
I think it's a very high-risk strategy he's pursuing. Getting so much the taxation systems cancelled and using borrowed money to replace it, I think is a very high-risk strategy. For the sake of the country, I hope it doesn't work as badly as I fear it might. I think we may be in for a rough ride.
And the Bank of England warned on Friday that the UK may already be in a recession. In other news today, US officials say Washington has been quietly warning Russia for months about the consequences if Vladimir Putin authorises a nuclear strike. It comes after the Russian leader threatened the possibility of using nuclear weapons in his war against Ukraine. From FSN's Washington bureau, Nick Harper reports.
US officials say there's been several months of regular private communications with Moscow, all aimed at deterring President Putin from using nuclear weapons. Aides say that the Biden administration has been vague about the possible consequences, focusing instead on strategic ambiguity, but making it clear there would be a US response. President Putin has announced a mobilization to strengthen Russia's army following losses in Ukraine, but there are still fears the Kremlin is weighing up using nuclear weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Russia, meanwhile, began holding referenda in Ukrainian territories it continues to hold. It's hoping to prove the people there want to become part of the Russian Federation, but Western governments are dismissing the process as a sham. The foreign ministers of the US and China met today on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. From FSN's bureau at UN headquarters, Will Denzelo with more.
The two foreign ministers didn't respond to shouted questions as they sat down for talks, but US State Department spokesperson Ned Price says the meeting was a chance to maintain open lines of communication. Tensions have grown since House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan and President Biden's comments that the US would defend the island if attacked. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says the Taiwan question is now the biggest risk to US-China relations. William Denzelo, New York.
One other headline today, the writer Hilary Mantel has died at the age of 70. The author of the Wolf Hall trilogy, she won the Booker Prize twice. She suffered a stroke on Thursday, according to her publisher. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. Got more on the Alex Jones trial. He is on trial again after losing multiple civil cases in Texas that were brought against him from some of the Sandy Hook victims. 10 of their families had brought 4 separate defamation suits against Jones, and now there's even more that are happening against him, except this time in Connecticut. It's Ian, Chris, and nobody here tonight. You can join us at 603-283-6160. And if you've ever worked or lived at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988, you've suffered from cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, you might be entitled to compensation. They had contaminants in the drinking water there that have led to these diseases. There might be some filing deadlines on this, so I would recommend that you get in touch with the phone number I'm going to give you here in a moment, sooner rather than later, and you can see if a loved one or you are eligible. The number is 888-918-1037. That's 888-918-1037. If you were at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and you had a serious health issue, the money's already set aside. Call them up over at 888-918-1037. As we continue here with the latest attack on Alex Jones, which, of course, a lot of it's been in the mainstream media who are just celebrating over the fact that Jones has been targeted for these civil trials where, as they point out in this story, this is the first actual mainstream acknowledgement of this, what I had heard. I'd heard this on social media about there being a limit to civil verdicts in Texas, meaning the jury can give you a big number, but the person who's found responsible doesn't have to pay the big number. They pay a much smaller.
That's not unique to Texas. In practice, it exists everywhere. And the reason is that juries tend to think that the case they're looking at is the only case in the world and the most horrible thing that's ever happened. So they give insane, because they know about it. They don't know about any of the other horrible things happening. So they have no perspective. And so they make awards that are frankly unrealistic a lot of the time. And higher courts routinely set these damages aside and make a more make something saner, especially if you're politically popular or you've paid off the proper politician.
Yeah, that's true. But even after they get a set aside and a lower number, is given, these awards are often absolutely ridiculous. I mean, an $8 billion reward down to $1 million reward because somebody died. And it's not a fault of the company, really. It's just that somebody did something bad who worked for the company and not even on company time. It seems to me to be still a bit ridiculous. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that routinely happens.
That's why the government cultivates hate. Because what they want these people to do is say, well, these people suffered a horrible loss. They can't sue the government because the system is unfair, but somebody should compensate them. And here's Alex Jones, and we hate him. And we have an excuse to make him pay for the damage that effectively we did by supporting the system. And I don't say we as in us.
You mean the government people?
Because nobody opposes the system.
The families they already won a bunch of cases down in Texas. Their victory set in motion three trials for juries to decide how much Jones should pay the families in compensatory and punitive damages. In the first trial, a jury in Austin, Texas, awarded Scarlett Lewis and Neil Heslin, the parents of Jesse Lewis, who died at Sandy Hook, nearly $50 million. But Texas law caps that verdict at far less. So that is confirmation that does exist. The restriction does exist there. However, in the current trial, the second of 3, families of 8 Sandy Hook victims sued Jones in Connecticut, where state law allows for a potentially ruinous financial verdict. The families say they sued Jones to hold him to account for the online abuse, confrontation, and death threats they received from people who believed his Sandy Hook lies. But again, did they sue the people who actually threatened them? Did those people get brought up on criminal charges? I mean, did something actually happen to them? Because
that would not advance the narrative, Ian. The narrative is that it's specifically MAGA Republicans who are responsible for all the ills in the world. And maybe these guys didn't qualify, although just having listened to Alex Jones's show once or twice probably does qualify you in the mind of the most rabid out there.
You would think if you were going to go after somebody, you would go after the people who are like actually attacking you, right? Which is not Alex Jones, as best I can tell.
But they don't have money. These are, who knows who has issued these death threats, but I suspect they are not people as wealthy as Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Unless they were actually issued by the FBI.
That's another good point, right? Like, how do you know if these are online threats sent anonymously to these people? How do you even know these are legitimate in the first place? It's a great point.
Or did they send them to themselves? Because that would certainly bolster their case. And if nobody's identified who'd sent these things and identified Alex Jones as the means by which they're just assuming that a lot of people talked a lot of mess about Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
How do they know that it was specifically Alex Jones?
Great question, and I don't know if there was any evidence put forward about that. That's an excellent point.
Here's something else to point out. It's almost certain that somebody who's heard about Sandy Hook from Alex Jones probably also heard it on mainstream media at some point.
Maybe.
I certainly recall it being on mainstream media, and I'm not sure if I heard Alex Jones say anything or not, but certainly it was on mainstream media.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not an Alex Jones listener, and you know that he even said that, it because somebody told you he said that. Somebody amplified his message. Was that the mainstream media? And if people lost respect for these people in Sandy Hook, who I think the opposite happened, I'll bet you there's some GoFundMes that have made a lot of money off this. So just the premise that people lost respect for these people as a result of some people probably did, but the vast majority of the people feel sorry for them.
Are we liable now that we're talking about a story in the mainstream media covering the fact that Alex Jones lied? Is that also make us liable for it?
Apparently, it's okay to say Alex Jones said these things, but it's not okay for him to say them.
Jones's effort to defend himself, according to the Times, was punctuated by violations of the judge's order barring mentions of partisan politics or politicians. As his testimony got underway, you
can't talk about what really happened. That would spoil their trial.
He attempted to cast the trial in political terms, saying the most important thing to him is, quote, crushing the globalists, unquote. At other times,
which is exactly what you're supposed to do when you're on show trial before a kangaroo court in a tyrannous government.
In fact, they actually address kangaroo court coming up here in a moment because that came up too. At other times, he professed little knowledge of attacks on the families.
Is kangaroo court racist against Australians? Where does that even come from?
That's a good question. What is the history of that? The trial.
Maybe I shouldn't say that anymore. Does anybody get offended by kangaroo court besides the people who operate them?
Great question. The trial and the judge that he professed little knowledge of the attacks. The trial and the judge that he and other InfoWars staff members had made on his show, and said he didn't recall things that he had said as recently as the previous day.
I don't. I get off this show and people say, "What'd you talk about on Free Talk Live today?" And I say, "I have no idea." All of my energy is tuned towards output.
Yeah.
I'm not storing anything.
I'm the same way. I'll say, I don't know. I have to check the show description.
Yeah, when you're a personality, you're definitely going to say things that you won't remember the next day.
There's more coming up here in moments. There's more on the way. You can join us here as well. If you get a thought, some thoughts you want to share regarding Alex Jones's persecution at 603-283-6160. Do you prefer to listen to Free Talk Live on your schedule on demand? You can find a link to our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com, which features the daily digest of our radio show 7 days a week. Just drop our RSS feed into your favorite podcast client or subscribe to us on the large platforms if you prefer, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartMedia, Spotify, and Stitcher. All the links are at feeds.freetalklive.com. If the daily digests aren't enough for you and you really don't want to miss a moment of Free Talk Live, you can always sign up for our AMPS Patreon at amps.freetalklive.com for just $5 a month, and you'll get the full radio show without recorded commercials. Plus, you'll help us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live. That's amps.freetalklive.com to join AMPS, or feeds.freetalklive.com to get our main podcast, or find us on the major podcast platforms.
Have you had enough of the big-name web hosting services that are long on promises but short on bleeding-edge features, uptime, and customer service? Try Agorist Hosting, the agile web host that offers full concierge service from website redesign, full e-commerce solutions, custom apps for your Shopify store, IPFS integration, and more. Agorist Hosting is ready to take your web presence into the future. To get started, head over to agoristhosting.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. Phones are open here. If you want to join in, your thoughts on the Alex Jones trial. Have you been watching it? I've only seen some clips, but apparently it is available. I don't know if it's streaming live or people are just putting it. I think it is probably streaming live because the clips are coming out pretty fast. I've not looked into that detail. If you've been watching it closely and you want to weigh in here, you're welcome to join us. Are they calling? I think one of the big questions is, are they actually calling in as witnesses some of these people who are ostensibly threatening the families of the Sandy Hook victims? Because that's the big claim, is that, oh, well, Alex Jones has this theory that Sandy Hook wasn't real, and he's now recanted that, by the way. Of course, that hasn't stopped them from coming at him with, as much political and attorneys as they possibly, as much might as they possibly can to ruin him financially. So apologies haven't made any difference. In fact, the story here from the New York Times says that Alex Jones says he's done saying he's sorry, because they're not letting up on him, that's for sure. But did they ever call the people that supposedly were actually doing the attacking against these families, which weren't physical, but not physical attacks, but online attacks, supposed death threats, that kind of thing? Was there ever any evidence of who those people were, or are we just supposed to accept that anonymous threats somehow came from Alex Jones? And even if they weren't anonymous,
well, not Alex Jones listeners,
or but that it was Alex's statements that somehow made these things happen, even though Jones, I don't think, ever said to harass these family members or anything like that. I've not heard those allegations, if that's the case. So anyway, Ian, Chris, nobody here in the studio tonight. If you want to join in, the number is 603-283-6160. So a little bit more here from the New York Times. Is basically a hit piece where they say that Jones was lying about what happened in Sandy Hook. And I'm sorry, if you are someone who is repeating something that's not true, there's a few different things besides that being a lie, right? Like there's a couple other options. There's the fact that it could be a lie, right? Like if you believe a thing is not true and you say that thing, then you are knowingly telling a lie. Yep. But if you just were fed misinformation, like, oh, masks can stop COVID, right? And then you go and you repeat that misinformation, then you're not lying because you're not intending to deceive somebody. You bought the lie. Somebody lied to you. You bought that lie, or somebody else passed on that misinformation and you believed it. So you're not lying unless you're trying to deceive somebody, and Jones seemed to really believe this. He really seemed to believe in this theory. Go ahead, nobody.
And this is why I mostly forgive the rank and file Branch Covidians, because if you actually believed what they believed, then some of their actions would have made sense. At least, getting their social panties in a bunch over it. But the thing is, they're people that have been bamboozled by big pharma, and that can happen. If you think about it, the half of the people in the world are below average. And they exist,
Yeah, the big takeaway, of course, from COVID was the massive amount of obedience that people showed. In fact, I've got a story about the World Economic Forum. If we get a chance, we'll get to it. I know that you wanted to talk about the Martha's Vineyard situation with the immigrants that happened, I think it was late last week. We didn't get to it really on Free Talk Live, and there was a lot of buzz about it, so I want to get into that story here in a moment. But just the final couple sentences here from the New York Times latest hit piece against Alex Jones. They say that the attorney, who's the equivalent of the prosecutor, it's not the right word, but I guess plaintiff's attorney, Mattei, pointed out that Jones had given a news conference outside the courthouse, watched the trial online, and maligned it on his show as a kangaroo court. He's also set up a kangaroo court webpage to encourage viewers to financially support his legal defense. At one point, Mattei began to question Jones by saying, quote, "There's going to be another mass shooting, isn't there?" Unquote. Jones interrupted him, saying, "Are you saying I'm going to shoot people? Like it's my fault? People think I killed the kids? And that's my answer to you," he said. Jones's testimony will resume, today apparently. So I guess he's been on the stand for a couple of days now. And that's the story from the New York Times. And if I get the chance, maybe I'll pull up one of the videos of Jones where the plaintiff's attorney is accusing him of calling the judge a tyrant, I think. And then they
probably is.
Yeah. And then they
Isn't
showed
truth supposed to be a defense? I think they should have a trial on that one, because then we would get to see the judge try to prove they're not a tyrant.
And then they put an image up on the monitor in the courtroom, which they took from Jones's website, I guess, where it shows the judge with like evil red glowing eyes, and Jones, fully right on said, "Yeah, if you're acting like a tyrant, I'm going to call you a tyrant." It was pretty entertaining. I got to give him credit for it.
Yeah.
So the number here is 603-283-6160. Nobody, you were paying close attention, or at least more so than I think Chris and I, to this Martha's Vineyard situation that developed last week. And I guess it's sort of over at this point. So now we can, I guess, comment on the whole thing. As I understand it, there was a busload of supposed immigrants sent from Florida.
They were real immigrants.
Okay. Sent from Florida up to Martha's Vineyard, which isn't that Massachusetts? Isn't that where that is? And it's Martha's Vineyard is a place where the richest of the rich, the America's royalty or whatever, people like the Obamas.
It's where Obama has his massive mansion,
right? And others. I don't know how large this property is, but as I understand it, it's home to some of the wealthiest people out there.
Yeah, and they have. It was really interesting to watch this play out, and I do have a story, but I'm gonna start with some comments, because the first thing is, I'm ambivalent about the whole issue. I think the problem with immigration is caused by immigration laws.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
And that if we just repealed that and welcomed people to come, things would be much better, because we would not be creating an underclass that is not that does not have the same protections the rest of us have, that can't openly exist, that can't report crimes against them, and that is a humanitarian nightmare.
Or
but
others.
The answer to it isn't to encourage more people to come here and be in that underclass. The solution is to repeal the damn laws.
Mm-hmm. Preventing people from coming here, you mean? Yeah.
Okay. A man is a lot smarter than a bag of weed, and you can't keep a bag of weed out of the country. So what makes you think you can keep a man out?
That's great. I've never even heard that line before. That's a good one.
Yeah,
I just came up with it.
Nice.
Because I was smoking some.
Very nice. I'm jealous.
Yeah.
So this Martha's Vineyard, I didn't even know where. I mean, I just heard that it was in Massachusetts.
What's the story?
What's the story?
Yeah, we haven't really covered it. What's the story, guys?
So they sent up a busload of immigrants to Martha's Vineyard, and the conservatives are celebrating this because, well, Ron DeSantis, the governor goon, top gangster in Florida, he is this conservative darling. And so this guy can, of course, do no wrong. It doesn't matter how big government he is on all kinds of other things. They only focus on these other areas. For instance, he loves the cops. Every single pro-cop bill, he will sign
and he's
it.
just straight up mean. What he did to those people was basically when taking the the illegals are like the unpopular kid in school, okay, and they think the liberals likes them, okay, and basically. This is him going up to them and saying, why don't you go talk to the people who say they like you? Because underneath, they don't like you either.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just mean. That's just goddamn mean.
It's probably true. I mean, it is.
It is true.
Yeah.
And that's the fucking.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
they
Hold on,
had them
hold
off
on.
that island.
Hold on. We had to put you on hold here. You can't say that on the radio. So I just got to put you on hold for just a quick moment. And now we are. Oh wait, what the hell
I'm
happened
sorry.
to the
Did I? I don't remember exactly what I said.
We'll just move on. You said something.
Okay,
you're not
we'll move
supposed
on
to say.
from that.
Getting heated there.
What were you trying to say there without the thing you shouldn't have said?
Oh.
About liberals and the immigrants.
I believe that just what I was trying to say is he's mean, but he's not necessarily wrong. And it would have been nice if he'd sent them to somewhere where they would have gotten a much better welcome, and he hadn't kind of arranged for it to be a bad welcome by sending them as a surprise.
All right, more coming up here in moments. I know you wanted to dig further into the story on the way here with Ian, Chris, and Nobody. The number is 603-283-6160. Hour 2's next.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. There's been a substantial crash in the value of sterling after the financial markets rejected a mini-budget presented by Britain's new Chancellor of the Exchequer. Kwasi Kwarteng unveiled plans for massive tax cuts to be funded by significant borrowing, with much of the benefit to be enjoyed by the wealthiest in Britain. The pound plummeted against the dollar and the FTSE lost 2% of its value. John Mills is a British businessman, economist, and entrepreneur.
I think it's a very high-risk strategy he's pursuing, getting so much the taxation systems cancelled and using borrowed money to replace it. I think is a very high-risk strategy, For the sake of the country, I hope it doesn't work as badly as I fear it might. But I think we may be in for a rough ride.
And the Bank of England warned on Friday that the UK may already be in a recession. In other news today, US officials say Washington has been quietly warning Russia for months about the consequences if Vladimir Putin authorises a nuclear strike. It comes after the Russian leader threatened the possibility of using nuclear weapons in his war against Ukraine. From FSN's Washington bureau, Nick Harper reports.
US officials say there's been several months of regular private communications with Moscow, all aimed at deterring President Putin from using nuclear weapons. Aides say that the Biden administration has been vague about the possible consequences, focusing instead on strategic ambiguity, but making it clear there would be a US response. President Putin has announced a mobilization to strengthen Russia's army following losses in Ukraine, but there are still fears the Kremlin is weighing up using nuclear weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Russia, meanwhile, began holding referenda in Ukrainian territories it continues to hold. It's hoping to prove the people there want to become part of the Russian Federation, but Western governments are dismissing the process as a sham. The foreign ministers of the US and China met today on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. From FSN's bureau at UN headquarters, Will Denzelo with more.
The two foreign ministers didn't respond to shouted questions as they sat down for talks. But US State Department spokesperson Ned Price says the meeting was a chance to maintain open lines of communication. Tensions have grown since House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan and President Biden's comments that the US would defend the island if attacked. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says the Taiwan question is now the biggest risk to US-China relations. William Denzelo, New York.
One other headline today, the writer Hilary Mantel has died at the age of 70. The author of the Wolf Hall trilogy, she won the Booker Prize twice. She suffered a stroke on Thursday, according to her publisher. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the reaction inside Russia to Vladimir Putin's decision to engage in the partial mobilization of military reservists. They are being processed now at military bases across the country, and many of them will soon ship out to Ukraine, with at least 300,000 being called up.
I think that mobilization is the biggest shock that a lot of people in the country have had since maybe February, since the start of the war.
Andrew Roth is Moscow correspondent for The Guardian.
For many Russians, this is the moment when the war comes home. A lot of people have been ignoring what's going on, and now that's going to become impossible. But the point is that it just raises the emotional kind of situation around the war in general. Right now, the reporting that I'm doing today is seeing small protests or just arguments breaking out at kind of draft centers around Russia where people are really emotional about what's happening. Even if it's not the kind of protest that we would expect, the things that we see in Moscow or St. Petersburg, this is about fighting or arguments or protests at the kind of village level. And I think that it's a force to be reckoned with. This is more than people have been asked to give in this country so far. And it's something that they were resisting doing for 7 months. So I think the Kremlin's worried about it.
Participation in those protests is already coming with a price. Many of those detained in the last couple of days have been told they are immediately being sent into the army. The main news again, there's been a substantial crash in the value of sterling after the financial markets rejected a mini-budget presented by Britain's new Chancellor of the Exchequer. US officials say Washington has been warning Russia quietly for months about the consequences if Vladimir Putin authorises a nuclear strike. And the writer Hilary Mantel, author of the Wolf Hall trilogy, has died at the age of 70. And that is the latest feature story news. Simon Marks reporting.
This is the Onion Week in Review. A study published Friday by the University of Minnesota found that mosquitoes have no physiological reason for biting humans, with researchers noting that the insects feed exclusively on pollen and seemingly only suck human blood out of spite.
According to our findings, mosquitoes usually spit out the blood after a bite. They just really enjoy ruining outdoor activities and spreading deadly diseases.
Researchers added that mosquitoes often bite a variety of vertebrates besides humans, including baby pandas, koala bears, and very small puppies, all for fun. And in tech news, a new Visa talking credit card urges buyers to go for it.
Come on, buy it. You know you want it.
In other news, the utterance of a secret password grants customers access to a long-rumored 18-inch Subway sandwich. It's easy to tell what an area man would look like as a skeleton, and a longtime teacher retires without changing a single student's life. This week's scheduled interview with the surly and forlorn Matthew Modine was cut for time and is doomed to never be seen. For more, visit theonion.com/newsbeat.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. We're kicking off the second hour of the program here. Of course, you can join us and bring up whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here in the studio tonight, it's Ian
and Chris.
And joining us remotely, we have...
Nobody
is here. Glad to have him. The number is 603-283-6160. All of a sudden, phones lit up. People have something to say here tonight, so we're going to go to those calls. And we're going to get a little bit deeper into this Martha's Vineyard situation, where apparently the governor, head gangster in Florida, sent a busload of immigrants up to Martha's Vineyard, and the idea was, well, you guys say you support immigration, so here, have some immigrants. And the conservatives have been really lauding this quite a bit online, but is everything what it seemed? Nobody's been looking closely at this, so we'll get into, he wants to talk about it, so we're going to get deeper into that. But first, we got to go to these calls. In fact, some people want to talk about this issue directly. Let's go to James in Michigan. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I was going to start with the Alex Jones thing. I jumped in a little late tonight, and I don't know if you covered it, but I think it's worth pointing out that there was absolutely zero trial on the guilt of him. These are all trials just on how much to pay.
Wait, what?
No.
How is there not a trial to find out whether he's guilty, so to speak, or not?
Oh,
first?
he defaulted on the trial. He never showed up to make an argument. Oh, and I'd like to know why that happened.
That's not true. What happened was they needed his deposition.
Deposition.
So he gave more time in deposition and more documents than ever issued in the state of Connecticut. And the judge said, you refused to give it, so we're going to direct a judgment.
Directed verdict? Wow.
So this is all, they're literally conspiring against Alex Jones.
That's what it sounds
which
like.
Is ironic, to say the least. Because,
so they
basically
and now they're publicizing all the hoopla of just how much we're going to pay them, and they're calling that the trial.
Wow. Thanks for clarifying that, man. I definitely appreciate that.
Can you explain this a little bit better as far as what exactly happened? What is a directed verdict, for example? What is what happened with the deposition exactly?
So the deposition is, he has to provide evidence that the judge said you have to provide everything you have, like every email you have related to this. And so he did. And then you have to come in and provide testimony that's recorded, and both the defense and the prosecutor can use that testimony. He gave like 3 days of testimony. And then all this, and then they said, well, you held back some of the emails, so a directed verdict is basically the judge going, it's pretty obvious you're guilty, so I'm just going to rule against you.
Right. So it didn't even get to the trial. It didn't get to a jury. It was just
nothing.
So, okay, so I know a little bit about what happened here, actually. And what I'm finding, what I'm a little bit, seems very bizarre about this case is you cannot have known something. You only have to provide, what you know, as I understand it anyway. So, like, for example, if you don't recall a text message coming in, you don't have to provide that text message or something along those lines.
Correct.
It may be that they can find that text message, say, through subpoenaing the telephone provider, for example. But that doesn't mean that you have to provide it if you don't have it or know about it. Something to that effect. That's my understanding from a lawyer, based on what I understand, for which a lawyer spoke on this issue.
Deposition is only providing what you're knowledgeable of having, basically. Everything else comes up in what would be a trial, but that trial never happened.
Were you trying to say something there? Nobody, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just, I lost.
That's all right.
It. Sorry.
James, what else
really
did you want to share?
Just that bad. Oh, the Martha's Vineyard thing, and all politics aside, and those poor immigrants. At the end of the day, I'm sorry, it's just funny. Hypocrisy in itself is hilarious to me when these elites come into play.
Well, let's clarify something. We haven't really even said what happened here. Nobody, can you give us a summary of what transpired? All I really got to was DeSantis sent a busload of immigrants to Martha's Vineyard, and things ensued.
Maybe now would be a good time to start reading the story, because it does that. And the story is entitled "Martha's Vineyard in Humanitarian Crisis After DeSantis Ships Migrants to Liberal Enclave."
Who's writing this piece? Where's it appear?
This appears in the New York Post.
Okay.
September 23rd, 2022.
All right.
And the byline is Olivia Land and Bruce Golding.
James, by the way, thanks for the call, man. I appreciate hearing from you tonight. Go ahead, Nobody.
The posh liberal enclave of Martha's Vineyard has been thrown into chaos by the arrival of 2 plane loads of migrants sent there by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, according to local reports. Roughly 50 immigrants were flown to the famed Massachusetts island, constituting what the local tourism board called a humanitarian crisis on Thursday. "This is an ongoing situation," wrote a county emergency management rep in a statement, noting that local authorities are actively collaborating to develop a coordinated regional response to 50 people. "We have reached out to our state and federal partners, federal help for 50 people, for additional long-term support and assistance. Some local pals learned about the new arrivals during a Wednesday night meeting of the West Tisbury Select Board, with town administrator Jennifer Rand saying she'd received furious texts from residents," the MV Times reported. "I'm a little unclear about the situation, as is everybody, because everybody is scrambling a bit," Rand said. Rand said that the migrants were headed to the St. Andrew's Church in Edgartown and might be given short-term housing at the Martha's Vineyard Agricultural Society's Ag Hall. "But that won't work for long because it doesn't have beds or showers," she said, adding that feeding the migrants could be difficult too because the Martha's Vineyard's Red Cross was not participating in the official response. In a prepared statement Thursday, the Red Cross said that it has been in contact with local emergency management, and while we have not yet been asked to provide any local support, we stand ready to do that. So the local Red Cross was not involved because nobody had troubled themselves to ask them.
Oh, wow.
Local Belcastro, the coordinator for the Martha's Vineyard homeless shelter, called the emergency housing arrangements for migrants a stopgap. She suggested that they would eventually need to be moved to a different location. At some point in time, they have to move from here to somewhere else, Belcastro told local news outlets. We do not have the services to take care of 50 immigrants.
I heard a rumor, and correct me if this is incorrect, that apparently the military or some sort of National Guard came and removed them off to a military base. Do you know, is that true?
150 National Guardsmen were sent to move these migrants off, but it was very carefully orchestrated for the media.
Mm-hmm.
Because instead of showing the military escorting these people off out of the liberal enclave, they did a big ceremony where everybody hugged and cried and
okay. Why do you need a military to move 50 people when it took one bus driver, presumably, maybe two?
It was apparently planes. This I don't know if there's any roads to get. I'd said it was a bus before, but apparently they had to fly him in. Stand by, nobody. We're going to continue here in moments. Your calls and thoughts are also welcome. The number is 603-283-6160. If you want to join us on your thoughts, if you've been observing this Martha's Vineyard thing as it has unfurled, there's more in moments. You can join us here on Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it! You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
Don't worry about things you can't control. Isn't that what they always say? But it's about impossible to avoid worrying about what's going on these days. The government has used the war on guns, the war on drugs, and the war on terrorism to tear our Bill of Rights to shreds. But you can fight back. The 10th Amendment Center has proven it, racking up major victories. For example, when the U.S. government claimed authority in the NDAA to have the military kidnap and detain Americans without trial, the nullifiers got a law passed in California, declaring the state's refusal to ever participate in any such thing. Their latest project is offnow.org, nullifying the National Security Agency. They've already gotten model legislation introduced in California, Arizona, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas, meant to limit the power of the NSA to spy on Americans in those states. We'd be fools to wait around for the U.S. Congress or courts to roll back Big Brother. Our best chance is nullification and interposition on the state level. Go to offnow.org, print out that model legislation, and get to work nullifying the NSA. The hero Edward Snowden has risked everything to give us this chance. Let's take it. Offnow.org.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
How many lawyers does it take to change a light bulb? None. They'd rather keep their clients in the dark. There are too many lawyer jokes to count. However, there are some lawyers with more noble intentions. At the Institute for Justice, we bring the light to our clients. We are a non-profit public interest law firm with clear values and principles. At IJ, we fight for those whose most basic rights are denied by the government. Visit our website today at ij.org.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. The phones are open here, and you can join us. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Ian, Chris, nobody here. You can join us. By the way, Free Talk Live is brought to you by Freedom's Phoenix. It's your source for all news, economic, government overreach, insane government spending, and more. You can get today's headlines all in one place. And from a fresh libertarian perspective, you can find that over at freedomsphoenix.com. That's freedoms with an S, phoenix.com. As we continue here, Nobody, you were giving us a rundown from the New York Post on what has transpired over the last week or so at Martha's Vineyard when apparently the governor, top gangster there in Florida, DeSantis, he sent a couple of plane loads of 50 immigrants there to Martha's Vineyard. And you were telling us a little bit more about that apparently they brought out the National Guard to make these people leave the island because they claim, and by the way, I looked it up, Martha's Vineyard is, it's not the smallest town in the world. There's 17,000 people living there. That's about just a little less than the population of Keene when the college students aren't around.
But that doesn't give you any image of how big Martha's Vineyard is, because they have 17,000 year-round residents, okay? But they get 150,000 people in every year during the season.
Whoa. That's right now, right? The summertime is the season.
The summertime is the season, but it's end of season, and that draws. There's an irony that's pointed out in the story. She noted the housing. The island is already tight on housing. We're in a housing crisis. As we are on this island, Balcastro said. So we can't house everyone here that lives here and works here. One snarky Twitter user quipped, a quick Airbnb search came up with 297 homes currently available.
Wow.
I'm sure they have a lot of empty summer homes available.
Yeah, well, with the amount of tax revenue this island must be collecting, I mean, it's Massachusetts. They're no stranger to taxes there. With 100,000 people coming in to visit during the summer months, they certainly have enough money to put somebody up in an Airbnb or 50 somebody's in an Airbnb.
But they don't want to spend the money on that. They want to spend that money on making things very nice for themselves and making sure that they're not providing anybody any services, because nobody who needs any services is anywhere near them.
Right, because you actually have to be able to fly or charter a ferry or something in order to get to this place, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it was, and coming back to DeSantis, he is a brilliant monster. Because he saw exactly how this was going to play out. And although the media is spinning it, eventually people come down from the media high, except the dedicated ones who are still mostly dedicated to the Church of Saint Covidian. People eventually figure out that they've been played.
What I want to know here is, how did DeSantis get these 50 people onto these planes? Were they people who just volunteered? Were they people who were arrested? What was the story there? Have you heard anything about that?
Well, and everything about this story is more complex than it appears. There are wheels within wheels within wheels. These people didn't even come through. They came through Florida because the charter flights, which picked them up in Texas, landed in Florida, and they were merely imported into Florida so they could be immediately deported to Martha's Vineyard. So,
okay, but DeSantis supposedly orchestrated this, right, with whoever it was in Texas?
DeSantis did orchestrate it, but he didn't have any illegal aliens of his own, so he had to borrow some from Texas.
So hold on. So these are purported. These are purportedly illegal, meaning that they have not filled out the government paperwork?
They had been processed and released once by somebody. It's, I assume, the Border Patrol. So they'd already been caught and released. because people think they're fish, I guess.
So
and then they were talked to by this mysterious woman, and there's actually a reward out for somebody who will shed light on the identity of this woman, who told them that there were jobs and homes and presumably cars and pots and pans waiting for them in Martha's Vineyard, which there were clearly not. And they got on the plane, and they got transported to first to Florida, then to Martha's Vineyard. But they did so willingly, and they signed releases, although none of them seem to have spoken English. So who knows if they knew what they were signing? Maybe somebody just said, okay, if you want to get on the plane, sign this paper. They said, we don't know what it says. And they said, sign it anyway.
So the claim is they got picked up by somebody there, and even though they weren't legal, they were released and not sent back to Mexico?
Well, almost none of them are sent back to Mexico. That's what people are upset about. Most of the people who are caught by the Border Patrol claim asylum. Most of them are not entitled to asylum under current law. I think they should be entitled to asylum by virtue of being human. But,
absolutely.
So long as they want to come and work.
Yeah.
But this is the whole. And this is how you cut this Gordian knot, because the way of infamy is to tell two lies and get people arguing out about which one is true. Okay, and that function in the United States are provided by the Republican and Democratic parties. They're the two lies. Okay, and each one of them sets up an absurd narrative that is believed by people only because they so strongly disbelieve the other side. So it's easier to convince people to disbelieve than it is to convince them to believe, but it's also a good way of imposing groupthink on them, because they're defending these ideas with the best information they've been provided with by their various branches of the corporate media, and none of this information is good. So they're both arguing convincing false stories.
Another thing I want to know about this is, since these 50 people have been removed from Martha's Vineyard at the hands of essentially the military, the National Guard, has anyone heard a peep about what has happened to them since, or have they disappeared into the...
Nobody cared once they crossed the border.
They did take them back down there, supposedly?
They deported them?
More coming up here in a moment. Hold that thought.
I will.
You can share your thoughts here with us as well at 603-283-6160.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. There's been a substantial crash in the value of sterling after the financial markets rejected a mini-budget presented by Britain's new Chancellor of the Exchequer. Kwasi Kwarteng unveiled plans for massive tax cuts to be funded by significant borrowing, with much of the benefit to be enjoyed by the wealthiest in Britain. The pound plummeted against the dollar and the FTSE lost 2% of its value. John Mills is a British businessman, economist and entrepreneur.
I think it's a very hybrid strategy he's pursuing, getting so much the taxation systems cancelled and using borrowed money to replace it. I think is a very hybrid strategy. For the sake of the country, I hope it doesn't work as badly as I fear it might. But I think we may be in for a rough ride.
And the Bank of England warned on Friday that the UK may already be in a recession. In other news today, US officials say Washington has been quietly warning Russia for months about the consequences if Vladimir Putin authorises a nuclear strike. It comes after the Russian leader threatened the possibility of using nuclear weapons in his war against Ukraine. From FSN's Washington bureau, Nick Harper reports.
US officials say there's been several months of regular private communications with Moscow, all aimed at deterring President Putin from using nuclear weapons. Aides say that the Biden administration has been vague about the possible consequences, focusing instead on strategic ambiguity, but making it clear there would be a US response. President Putin has announced a mobilization to strengthen Russia's army following losses in Ukraine, but there are still fears the Kremlin is weighing up using nuclear weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Russia, meanwhile, began holding referenda in Ukrainian territories it continues to hold. It's hoping to prove the people there want to become part of the Russian Federation, but Western governments are dismissing the process as a sham. The foreign ministers of the US and China met today on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. From FSN's bureau at UN headquarters, Will Denzelo with more.
The two foreign ministers didn't respond to shouted questions as they sat down for talks. But US State Department spokesperson Ned Price says the meeting was a chance to maintain open lines of communication. Tensions have grown since House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan and President Biden's comments that the US would defend the island if attacked. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says the Taiwan question is now the biggest risk to US-China relations. William Denzelo, New York.
One other headline today, the writer Hilary Mantel has died at the age of 70. The author of the Wolf Hall trilogy, she won the Booker Prize twice. She suffered a stroke on Thursday, according to her publisher. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, and you're welcome to join us here. Your thoughts on the Martha's Vineyard immigrant story, where Ron DeSantis, the head boss of the Florida gang, sent a group of migrants, apparently from Venezuela, according to, I jumped to the conclusion that they were Mexican, but they had moved from Venezuela up into San Antonio, Texas, where they were then offered a ride or a flight to Massachusetts, according to one of the migrants interviewed at this MSN story. They didn't know they were going to Martha's Vineyard, but they did know they were going to Massachusetts.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is in Massachusetts, right?
It is,
correct. So they
correct.
weren't lied to. They were told the truth. It just wasn't where, I guess,
not
they
the
were
whole
expecting.
truth.
What if we solved this problem by making, by giving them jobs? I think we should hire the entire bunch to go around and lecture rich white liberals about what is really like living in Venezuela under the system that they propose, where the government
Socialism.
controls literally everything.
Yeah.
We should hire them to tell people what socialism is really like. And I think we could raise enough money by doing it to make the program self-supporting. And I'm gonna propose that to the church as a spiritual outreach program that we should do, that I think we can do at a break even at least.
Yeah, I've got this story here that's essentially one of these fake fact-check stories. You know, whenever you see the media claiming to be a fact-check, you know it's just going to be straight-up propaganda. And they spend the bulk of the story trying to deny that the military was involved in this, even though they admit that the National Guard had up to 125 members who were activated to assist this. So, I mean, to draw a line and say the National Guard isn't the military when many of them were sent over to fight and die in Iraq is ridiculous.
And libertarians are trying to protect that with the Protect the Guard Act.
Defend the Guard.
Let's back up a moment. If I'm not mistaken, the federal government, which has the military, will call on the National Guard to join its ranks, meaning they will be military.
They're ordered to.
They are literally military at a future point, or whenever it's needed, basically.
Yeah, but on we should make the point that these particular people were not called out by the
federal government.
By the federal government,
right?
They were called out by the governor of Massachusetts, who is a Republican, and we should make the point that it's not clear that anybody on Martha's Vineyard asked for that to happen. It could be that the Republican governor called up the National Guard and then basically so that he could say, oh, you send some illegals to Martha's Vineyard, and they call out the Guard. Well, they didn't call out the Guard. The governor called out the Guard. So somebody should ask him why he did that and who asked.
All kinds of shiftiness going on.
Back a moment.
Yeah,
So,
and the lesson for libertarians in this whole story is not the Republicans are right, and it is not the Democrats are right. It is both of these groups of people are monsters, and leaving them in charge of anything is suicide.
I think the libertarians agree with you. It's the rest of the world that you have to convince of that.
I've heard libertarians who, because libertarians are kind of bleeding hearts, and all of them sympathize with somebody in this story. They may sympathize with the illegal aliens, and I am going to continue to use that word because saying they're illegal is not a judgment of them. It's not saying that they're invalid. It's saying that this law exists, and we need to get rid of this law. It's the law that's wrong. It's not the people that are wrong for just existing and wanting to come where everybody's saying they can't hire anybody. My local Cumberland Farms, I depend on that place to be 24 hours. I would happily tip the cashier a couple of extra dollars in the middle of the night when I need some ho-hos and a pack of cigarettes.
Send those guys up here. I mean, if Martha's Vineyard or whatever can't use them, then we sure as hell can here in New Hampshire, because like the same thing you say, I was just out tonight. Every place I go, it's now hiring.
Send us the ones who understand what went wrong in Venezuela, or at least are open to a competing explanation.
Well, there's a good chance if they want to leave Venezuela, they at the very least are open to understanding why it was such a crappy place and why they wanted to get out. If they don't already know,
they already know.
It's not already obvious to them.
And there's a brilliant book. There is a brilliant book. It's The Mystery of Capital by Hernando de Soto, ironically named. He is not a conquistador, though. He was
no relation.
He was born in Peru, possibly a distant relation, because they're. I mean, some of the conquistadors stayed and married.
Some of them probably sired a lot of children with their conquered women as well, I would guess.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, but no, I read that book while I was in jail. It was really good. It explained why that so many other countries outside of the U.S., because they don't have the same quote-unquote property rights as people in the U.S. do. They can't basically build wealth for themselves by doing something as simple as owning property in their own name.
And you know what would solve that problem is crypto. because, and of course, getting rid of the government laws.
Sure.
Basically, in this, I would be perfectly happy to take the mutualist solution and say, well, the government claims to own this land, but they're an illegitimate organization, so they can't own land because they're a gang of criminals. So basically, whoever's living there, okay, we're just going to grant you a title, and that would completely solve their problem and allow the if they had freedom to go along with that, then that would end the idea that there are these perpetually poor countries, because the concept of a poor country is anathema to capitalism.
Right. Hold that thought. No, but I want to bring Penguin in here. He's been waiting patiently to get in this conversation. Go ahead.
Sorry, I've been running.
No worries.
My mouth.
Go ahead, Penguin.
I don't see everybody else getting anxious. So.
It's all good. You're doing fine.
Nobody's covered a lot about I say, but I have a lot to say. I think it was 48 migrants from like Colombia and Venezuela that were in a privately run shelter in San Antonio, and then DeSantis chartered planes to take them to Florida and then to Martha's Vineyard. So they weren't in Florida in the first place, and he probably used a taxpayer's fund that was meant to, deport, quote unquote, put people from Florida or relocate them from Florida, which
he did.
Whatever.
Yeah. And
then and they posted the forms that they apparently signed, and of course, it clearly shows. I didn't even read them, but it clearly, and I could understand the Spanish, but it clearly shows different text in English and Spanish. It's different amount of paragraphs, different words. I mean, you can clearly see that it does not say the same thing. And they apparently were promised housing and jobs somewhere in Massachusetts or maybe in Boston. I'm not sure what.
Wow, the government lied to those people? I'm shocked.
So it's fraud and deception used there. And it clearly, like, these people are coming. I mean, they clearly are seeking out jobs and ways to set new routes and provide for themselves. They're not coming to be charges of the state or like wards of the people wherever they are, and to be taken care of and fed on taxpayer dime or out of people's
They were
charity.
willing to go there and go to work, and instead now they're in state custody. Now the state of Massachusetts, according to this article at MSN, is
in state custody.
Yeah, they're at Joint Base Cape Cod. Hang on, Penguin. I know you probably had more to say here. We'll continue.
Are the kids in fuck?
Oh, hold that thought there, buddy. More coming up here. He caught himself. The number is 603-283-6160. You're not on an internet show yet. That's tomorrow night. That's Beard Talk Live at 10:30 Eastern. More coming up here in moments. You can join us here on Free Talk Live and share your thoughts on Martha's Vineyard and the immigrants. Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it. And once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world. So I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here. And I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com.
Is oral health important to you? If you don't like your own teeth, fresh breath, or kissing people, then by all means, stop listening. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I became passionate about the product that she created and never want to live without it. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, but I find it does much more. They want you to love My Magic Mud as much as I do, so they're giving you a money-back guarantee plus 20% off. Go to MyMagicMud.com and use coupon code FTL20 at checkout. MyMagicMud.com, FTL20.
If you you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market. Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. The phones are open here, and you can join us and bring in whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can weigh in on the situation with the migrants that have been shipped up to Martha's Vineyard, now in some form of government custody. They didn't need that. These are able-bodied people who were willing to work. They came here to escape from Venezuela, and according to Penguin, who's on the line with us here from Virginia, they were here also are coming from Colombia. What were you going to say there, Chris?
I mean, what are the there are charges? Like, what's the basis for their detention?
They were removed because Martha's Vineyard didn't want them, and so the state, in the form of the National Guard, apparently took them out of there on I think a chartered ferry, and then brought them to the mainland in Massachusetts, where they're now being held at something called Joint Base Cape Cod, or maybe they're still on the Cape, it sounds like. But and of course the mainstream media is reporting that the governor has said that available services include interpreters, case management that can help immigrants access temporary housing. And they're providing food, shelter, and services to the immigrants. And had they actually been given what they were promised, which was the opportunity to work, it sounds like, they would have been able to find all those things on their own in Martha's Vineyard. But now they're in the state's hands. It's like you were saying, nobody, let them come up to New Hampshire. We've got all kinds of jobs here. If they're having trouble finding jobs in Massachusetts, everybody's hiring here. But Penguin, you're on the line. What else did you want to share with us?
That was most of it, but basically, the deal is that they were in, at least for temporarily, like a house and comfortable in a privately run shelter in San Antonio, and they were taken up there with the promises that they'd have the opportunity to get housing, and work, and people do. There are privately run organizations that kind of house immigrants and help them transition and stuff like that. But you know, they were there, and they obviously are like able-bodied people that can like exist. So the problem is that Martha's Vineyard had no heads up. They were just flown there unannounced, dropped off. There was no provision made for them. There was no notice. It was a stunt to create as much disruption as possible, and there just wasn't anything in place, I think, to receive them. And it's really not on them to just have people dumped there that could have made their way to any number of places that would offer them the opportunity to, you know, have some housing, or maybe with charitable money, and to get started and to get a job, and to have authorization to get a job, which they obviously shouldn't need if they're able-bodied people, but that's the way the law is set up in this country.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Penguin, for the call tonight. Nobody got any thoughts on that?
I must confess, I just got back to the headset, so I'm not going to prevaricate.
No worries. He was just pointing out that the migrants, you know, they had been promised some things that didn't come true in order to get them on that plane in the first place.
Well, they have not yet come true. At least I assume that they don't have jobs on the military base, so technically they do have housing. So I don't know. This is I think as a prediction it was accurate. As a statement of contract, it was inaccurate. So the question is, were these people hired? Or were they, or was it just predicted that if they got to Martha's Vineyard, somebody would give them a job, which is likely, it is likely true. And it comes back to my comment before we went to break when I said nobody cared after they crossed the border. That's probably not true. For one thing, I was referring to the border of Martha's Vineyard. Mm-hmm. Which is very well protected, apparently. And there's no catch and release there. They catch and they release you on the other side of the border. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what these people were being caught for at all, because if their crime is existing and being human, well, I'm guilty of that too.
Well, apparently, at least according to what we saw or what I saw online, is they were at some sort of San Antonio shelter. They weren't per se guilty or charged with something. I mean, if they are from Venezuela, they may be able to seek asylum. Ultimately, I don't know what
is Venezuela. I mean, it seems like what the country should do is just have a list of countries where if you come from here, you're either eligible or you're not eligible. Okay, because people aren't claiming that there's somebody after them in particular in Venezuela. Mm-hmm. As I understand it, they're just saying the government is a bunch of socialists, they're after everybody, mm-hmm. which is true. But if you just publish that, then you would effectively make immigrants from Venezuela not illegal immigrants, and then there would be absolutely no problem. The people who had jobs for them could just provide them with jobs, and that would be the end of it.
I want to go to Major Payne. He's on the line here in Michigan. Go ahead, Major.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that, speakless or nobody, because 50 people landing on Martha's Vineyard. There's 17,000 year-round residents, right, and $1.50 during the peak season. Now you tell me, with these poor folks that are willing to live in squalor, mm-hmm. there isn't anybody that could find a garden shed to house this garden.
I don't buy it for a moment that they couldn't take on 50 people. And, in what is a relatively large town of 17,000, presuming not all 100,000.
But they've never seen a poor person before. They don't know what they eat. Okay? They don't.
I got to get back to Venezuela right quick. This is something you guys might not have realized.
By the way, 50 people out of 17,000 is like 0.3% of 1%. Like, that's barely anybody. That's nothing. Anyway.
And meanwhile, some of these towns in Texas there'll be a town of 20,000, but they'll have 50,000 migrants pass through. And these are not because they're coming here illegally. Only because these laws exist, along the way, they're getting victimized by these drug cartels that are now people cartels, labor cartels. They're basically unions, I guess. And so they show up here, and it's not like they just got on a plane. They've been through a weeks-long ordeal, and they don't have any resources left.
What's that, Major?
You guys need to realize what's going on in real time in Venezuela. I mean, I know you guys all remember a while back when the government took over all the industry and the oil and everything else. They beat it down so bad, even the toilet paper industry went out of business.
Yep, that's right.
Isn't it amazing that with gas prices at all-time highs, the massive oil-producing nation of
Venezuela?
Thank you, whatever country we're talking about, is not able to make ends meet. That was the whole saving grace when Chavez was doing all of these crazy programs, was that the price of oil was high, and they were producing enough oil to pay for it.
Right, so
now they can't even do that, apparently.
That went down 7 to 10 years ago. Now what they're doing is they're emptying their prisons, and they're sending them north. DeSantis was a little ahead of the game. He smelled this coming. This was like lighting a bag of poop on your neighbor's porch that you despise.
I don't know if it's fair to jump to a conclusion and say that these people were prisoners, Major. That's
because
not fair.
The thing is, no other country in the world has as many prisoners as the United States. So when they're talking about emptying their prisons, they're talking about a tiny fraction of the people who are coming across. Okay, they're intentionally throwing some poison in the food, is what they're doing, but it's still mostly food.
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily jump to a conclusion that just because somebody's been to a Venezuelan prison, makes them a bad hombre or whatever. Certainly there's some gangbangers in there, but if you talk out against the Maduro regime, you're probably going to see the inside of a prison cell in Venezuela.
Yeah, and the people the Free Staters would want, of course, were exactly the people who were in prison for speaking out of the government.
Yeah, thanks, Major, for the call
out
tonight.
Against the government.
Appreciate hearing from you. There's more coming up here, and you can join the show as well. Hour number 3 is on the way. Since he brought it up, though, I've actually been sitting on some Venezuelan show prep for, a couple months now. And we could talk about what's been going on there in Venezuela. We haven't checked in with the insane situation there in quite a while. You can join us here, though, and bring up whatever's on your mind in Hour 3 coming up on Free Talk Live.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
Have you had enough of the big-name web hosting services that are long on promises but short on bleeding-edge features, uptime, and customer service? Try Agorist Hosting, the agile web host that offers full concierge service from website redesign, full e-commerce solutions, custom apps for your Shopify store, IPFS integration, and more. Agorist Hosting is ready to take your web presence into the future. To get started, head over to agoristhosting.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. There's been a substantial crash in the value of sterling after the financial markets rejected a mini-budget presented by Britain's new Chancellor of the Exchequer. Kwasi Kwarteng unveiled plans for massive tax cuts to be funded by significant borrowing, with much of the benefit to be enjoyed by the wealthiest in Britain. The pound plummeted against the dollar and the FTSE lost 2% of its value. John Mills is a British businessman, economist and entrepreneur.
I think it's a very high-risk strategy he's pursuing, getting so much of the taxation systems cancelled and using borrowed money to replace it. I think is a very high-risk strategy. For the sake of the country, I hope it doesn't work as badly as I fear it might. But I think we may be in for a rough ride.
And the Bank of England warned on Friday that the UK may already be in a recession. In other news today, US officials say Washington has been quietly warning Russia for months about the consequences if Vladimir Putin authorizes a nuclear strike. It comes after the Russian leader threatened the possibility of using nuclear weapons in his war against Ukraine. From FSN's Washington bureau, Nick Harper reports.
US officials say there's been several months of regular, private communications with Moscow, all aimed at deterring President Putin from using nuclear weapons. Aides say that the Biden administration has been vague about the possible consequences, focusing instead on strategic ambiguity, but making it clear there would be a US response. President Putin has announced a mobilization to strengthen Russia's army following losses in Ukraine, but there are still fears the Kremlin is weighing up using nuclear weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Russia, meanwhile, began holding referenda in Ukrainian territories it continues to hold. It's hoping to prove the people there want to become part of the Russian Federation, but Western governments are dismissing the process as a sham. The foreign ministers of the US and China met today on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. From FSN's bureau at UN headquarters, Will Denzelo with more.
The two foreign ministers didn't respond to shouted questions as they sat down for talks. But US State Department spokesperson Ned Price says the meeting was a chance to maintain open lines of communication. Tensions have grown since House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan and President Biden's comments that the US would defend the island if attacked. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says the Taiwan question is now the biggest risk to US-China relations. William Denzelo, New York.
One other headline today, the writer Hilary Mantel has died at the age of 70. The author of the Wolf Hall trilogy, she won the Booker Prize twice. She suffered a stroke on Thursday, according to her publisher. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the reaction inside Russia to Vladimir Putin's decision to engage in the partial mobilization of military reservists. They are being processed now at military bases across the country, and many of them will soon ship out to Ukraine, with at least 300,000 being called up.
I think that mobilization is the biggest shock that a lot of people in the country have had since maybe February, since the start of the war.
Andrew Roth is Moscow correspondent for The Guardian.
For many Russians, this is the moment when the war comes home. A lot of people have been ignoring what's going on, and now that's going to become impossible. But the point is that it just raises the emotional kind of situation around the war in general. Right now, the reporting that I'm doing today is seeing small protests or just arguments breaking out at kind of draft centers around Russia where people are really emotional about what's happening. Even if it's not the kind of protest that we would expect, the things that we see in Moscow or St. Petersburg. This is about fighting or arguments or protests at the kind of village level. And I think that it's a force to be reckoned with. This is more than people have been asked to give in this country so far, and it's something that they were resisting doing for 7 months. So I think the Kremlin's worried about it.
Participation in those protests is already coming with a price. Many of those detained in the last couple of days have been told they are immediately being sent into the army. The main news again, there's been a substantial crash in the value of sterling after the financial markets rejected a mini-budget presented by Britain's new Chancellor of the Exchequer. US officials say Washington has been warning Russia quietly for months about the consequences if Vladimir Putin authorises a nuclear strike. And the writer Hilary Mantel, author of the Wolf Hall trilogy, has died at the age of 70. And that is the latest feature story news. Simon Marks reporting.
A Rasmussen poll reveals that nearly all American voters share a deep fear of botching another election, with most voters admitting that selecting candidates for public office is something they're historically just not particularly good at.
I really hope I don't completely fuck things up as usual, but you never know. Things do happen.
According to the poll, 3/4 of voters said Election Day panic would cause them to base their vote entirely on hearsay, while 93% acknowledged that they only recognize names of local candidates from signs along state highways. In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, stunned friends and acquaintances expressed shock and disbelief when a body found in the woods turned out not to be Justin. Local residents found the naked corpse draped over a tree stump Saturday, and as news spread, many found themselves struggling to comprehend how it wasn't Justin lying dead in the forest.
I heard the news, and I still can't come around to it. I just can't imagine that it's not Justin there lying dead in the woods. Are they absolutely sure it's not him?
Friends and family are still urging authorities to double-check the body, or at the very least bring in Justin as a suspect.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, and we're kicking off the third hour of the program here. You can join us and bring up whatever you want to talk about. Here in the studio tonight, it's Ian and Chris. Remotely joining us, we have nobody is here. A little drowned out by that music. Apologies for that, but he is with us. And the number here is 603-283-6160. We were just talking about the migrants that were sort of artificially bused to Martha's Vineyard under allegedly false pretenses. They were told
all busing is artificial. That doesn't happen in nature.
What I meant was that it wasn't a natural process of, you know, it wasn't. It seems like it wasn't done with good intentions, right? It was done with political intentions. No. It was done by DeSantis, who is the king governor there in Florida, and he wanted to win some points off of these people with his base.
And he played the game brilliantly.
He did.
You know, but and it is the game. This is how politics are done. Politics has always been a business of dirty tricks. Mm-hmm. So the question is, do we want a system in which the best players of dirty tricks end up on top? I don't think that's necessarily should be a selling point.
Agreed. We're going to continue here, but it did bring up the question of what's going on in Venezuela. We haven't actually done any headlines from Venezuela in recent months, and I've been sitting on one.
Speaking of dirty tricks.
Yeah. I mean, these are just, it's hard to say which of these politicians is the lowest of the low. I mean, DeSantis or the guy from Massachusetts or Maduro down in Venezuela. But let's go to the phones here to Vermont, another socialist hellhole, and Rob is on the line here. Go ahead, Rob. We have Rob? Rob in Vermont? Rob going once? We might have lost him. He was on hold for a while. Rob going twice.
We were robbed.
Oh, man. All right. Well, maybe he'll call back. I appreciate it. He was going to tell us about some corrupt cop here in the Keene area that's been outed recently, being caught in lies. So I'm sure we're going to hear about that a little bit later. Meanwhile, we go to Sarah on the line in New Mexico. Go ahead, Sarah. Oh, you know what? I had it. I hope I didn't just dump Rob. I had it turned down. I didn't realize it. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, am I on? I'm so excited. Did you know that our great Albuquerque police cop shows are being aired on television in other states on real time?
Albuquerque Police Cop Shows. Is there a name for this show?
I don't know, but
yeah, the naming is terrible. They need to change that title.
Yeah, it doesn't really roll off the tongue.
Well, you know what? We used to have the best cop show aired, but our Mayor Chavez, he banned it.
What was it called?
I don't know.
How could it be the best show if you don't remember the name of it?
Naming is important.
Well, but the song went like this. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for
Yeah,
you?
see, I watched it in Detroit, and there it was, bad cops, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when we come for you?
Ooh. Sarah, you can remember the theme song, but you can't remember the name of that television show.
Wasn't it just Cops?
Yes! That's what the name of the show was. It's been around for decades. Huh?
No, but it's a different spin. It's a real time cop show, and I don't know if it's where it's being aired.
Hold on. Hold on, Sarah. You're saying that the show you're talking about that is more recent is real time? That's got to be terrible.
That's what I hear. I heard on the radio. It's real time, and then the cops are getting they're getting propositioned by women. These cops are on the show. The women want to marry them and date them, and they're asking them how tall they
Badge
are.
bunnies. Are you into that, Sarah? Are you into cops?
Are you a badge bunny?
Yeah.
I can see her as a badge bunny.
No, but the thing is that he must have been a hot cop for them to get all excited like this. He was celebrity.
No such thing. Sarah.
Some women just like psychopaths.
Yeah, they like to be abused. Sarah, are you into that? Are you into if you could date a cop, would you do it?
I mean, they're kind of intriguing. Some of them are really handsome. But you know what? I was going to tell you, I used to watch the Albuquerque cop shows in Boston, and it was the best.
Was it a turn on?
They keep running it and running it and running it and running. Well, the cops were the criminals that they're trying to catch. That's what made it so funny.
Thanks for the call tonight, Sarah. The number here is 603-283-6160. And I'm going to bring Rob on here. Sorry, Rob, I had the switch thrown down when you were supposed to be on the air. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
Speaking of cops.
Speaking of cops, yeah, I've got an update here in my case here. I many years ago went through a trial back in 1990 in the city of Keene, New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than to take the plea deal, I went ahead and decided that we're going to go to trial. I don't have any evidence on me. And lo and behold, went through the trial, and I lost.
Mm-hmm.
Can't understand. I could never understand why. As a matter of fact, for over 40 years, I couldn't understand how I lost the trial. So I spent 10 years in the system, got out, went on with my life, and then fast forward 40 years later.
Roughly. It's been 30, but go ahead.
Right.
It's a long time.
The Lori list comes out, and the detective...
This is, by the way, for our listeners that don't know, the Lori list. It's a New Hampshire term for a list of state police and local cops who had some sort of an issue, whatever that was, some sort of questionable thing was brought up about them, and then subsequently hidden away for, in many cases, decades, inaccessible to the public. These are records that were sealed off to essentially protect these officers, but after, I believe, the ACLU of New Hampshire and some other groups pressed the system and filed lawsuits, they got this thing revealed, and lo and behold, one of the officers that was part and parcel to your conviction was on the list.
Exactly, and that detective's name is... James F. McLaughlin.
James McLaughlin, who is, by the way, this sort
We've
of
met him, haven't we?
Oh yeah, I'm sure you've seen him around. He's he looks like this old guy. He's an older guy, and he made headlines outside of your case, Rob. He made headlines over the years for being Keene Police's online undercover pervy cop, the one that pretends to be teenage boys and such, and supposedly sets, and also of age, people who are over the age of 18. He sets people up for prostitution stings and underage prostitution stings or whatever. So basically, he lies to people for a living, pretends he's somebody he's not, and then he's arrested literally hundreds of people by doing this.
Okay, I won't usually kink shame people, but that's a weird kink.
Yeah. And so he's gotten a lot of like national recognition for the work that he's done in these areas. And so this is the guy who was caught telling more than one lie, apparently. There's more info that's come out about him recently.
Yeah, it appears that 400 people in that type of setup. And apparently
this out. Paid liar turns out to be liar.
An actual liar.
At 11.
Yeah. Turns out, it appears that he has been effectively, I don't know if it's technically entrapment but he's basically been entrapping people.
Sure.
Basically.
Well, that was known about him. That wasn't the secret. But what was revealed recently, Rob, there was some paperwork that came out, like a 50-something page document came out about him that revealed even more untoward behavior in like the 80s, correct?
Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, it was 54 pages. Mm-hmm. And, we talked about things like, him shooting at beer kegs at a party that another officer broke up. He lied to his own, superiors. He erased tapes.
Yeah, but they kept him on the job. Even though he had been caught in dishonest activity, they kept him on long enough to where he retired. Yep. Of course, now he's working for more government. More coming up.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Gold and silver. You can own the most stable assets in recorded history with BullionMax.com. Buy direct from BullionMax.com without talking to a salesperson, and your precious metals shipped fully insured direct to your home. Free Talk Live can get you their silver starter kit at employee pricing. Just go to BullionMax.com/FTL. It includes 5 ounces of the most desirable silver products. This offer's limited to 1 per household, so get yours now. Go to BullionMax.com/FTL. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
If you're looking for work, or even if you're not, here's an innocent mistake you really want to avoid. Never return calls before listening to your voicemail. Your wireless phone sends calls you didn't answer into voicemail, and it shows you phone numbers for calls you missed. Important, don't call back callers you missed until you have first listened to your messages. Otherwise, you frustrate people who bothered to leave messages by asking them to repeat a message they just left as your voicemail greeting instructed them to. If you're a job applicant, this alone could be a deal killer. And even if you're not, there are few things you can convey to someone that are as fundamentally maddening as, "I didn't hear you." With money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important. For more tips for job seekers and everyone else, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. Phones here are open. You can join us. 603-283-6160 is the number. That's 603-283-6160. Ian, Chris, nobody here in the studio tonight. And Free Talk Live is brought to you by BullionMax.com. People who are savvy investors are probably already buying gold and silver, and you can too. Bullion Max makes it super easy. You can buy without talking to a salesperson, and your precious metals will ship to you fully insured directly to your home. You can get the silver starter kit from Bullion Max at employee pricing just by going to bullionmax.com/FTL and get yours there. It's 5 ounces of the most desirable silver products. You know that the financial world is in peril right now. The Federal Reserve just raised rates for the 3rd consecutive time. Inflation is, of course, not going to be slowing down likely anytime soon. And might be a good idea to get some gold and silver. They have, by the way, gold backs over at bullionmax.com, as well as other beautiful forms of silver and gold. But you can get started with the silver starter kit over at bullionmax.com/FTL. Only one per household on the silver starter kit. That's bullionmax.com/FTL. As we go back to Rob in Vermont. And Rob, you were telling us about this guy. What was his name? This cop that's been found to be quite dishonest over his career?
His name is Detective Jim McLaughlin.
Jim McLaughlin, who worked for the Keene Police in southwestern New Hampshire for many years. In fact, long enough to be able to retire. So he's doing what they call double dipping now. He's collecting the full, 90% pension that they give to cops. And he's got a job now with the county prosecutor's office as an investigator with them.
Wow.
So he's getting a salary from them, and he's collecting that sweet, sweet pension and whatever other bennies that he gets from his retirement. So despite the fact that he had been caught in multiple lies to his superiors, and you were just about to tell us a little bit about that, Rob.
Yeah, well, see, my case was a little bit different than the other cases that went, because he didn't entrap me or anything.
Mm-hmm.
My situation was where when I decided that we were going to go to trial, the county attorney never turned over exculpatory evidence that showed that Detective McLaughlin had credibility issues.
Right. So what you're saying is, had your defense attorney known that this person had issues with honesty, that should have been brought up in the trial and used to impugn this witness and say, look, you can't trust a word this guy says. Motion to dismiss this witness, please. But that was never presented to you. It was hidden.
No, the county attorney is required, both state and federally, to turn over all exculpatory evidence to the defense, and that just never happened. And the prosecution went further and put Detective McLaughlin on the stand, to testify against him.
Now, is it my recollection that he was the only one who testified, correct?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, you basically have, and this is the messed up part about this. This is not something that happens once in a while. We see it all the time when we go into court, cops getting up on the stand and lying.
Sure.
It doesn't happen every time, but more often than not, they're either outright lying or they're manipulating the truth to such a degree that basically what's coming out of their mouth is a lie. And it's sick. And you hear about these situations where you've got this guy who's gone after 400 people. How many of them even did anything, any of the things that were accused? Because one of his tactics, if I understand it correctly, was basically he would manipulate people. He would say that they said certain things, not have any evidence of it. Those people maybe never did say those things, and then he would use that against them in order to get them to take a plea deal. So maybe he
wants to be a sex offender, right? He probably offer something less than a sex offender status, and then, yeah.
So you basically are forced. Most of these people were probably forced into taking these plea deals, pleading guilty as some sort of sex offender.
400 actually took it to trial, like Rob did,
right? And then of course, if you did take it to trial, look at what happened to Rob.
Right.
Sent
up the river. You don't get your 10 years back, even if you can overturn this, Rob. And I understand you've found an attorney and you're working on some sort of a challenge to this conviction. Even if you are able to overturn this, hopefully that would throw into question all of the other convictions that he brought about, maybe pave a way for some of those other people to somehow get some form of compensation. But, I mean, what's the best you can hope for? A check from the government?
Well, I mean, I'm hoping to be able to get my family's name cleared out of this. And, I would like to see some type of compensation.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years, man, that you deserve a little bit more than a little bit of compensation. You deserve a lot of compensation.
Exactly. And, I don't know at this point what's going to happen. I got to wait and hear from the county attorney.
I know what's going to happen. The system's going to protect this guy. They're going to do everything they can. They're not going to throw him under the bus until the last minute, until it's, until you've got enough to where they can't deny it or whatever. They're going to try they're going to close ranks. That's what the whole Lori List thing was all about. It was about protecting these cops who were doing dishonest things and not allowing the light of the media or the light of day to be shown on these people. And you're trying to show that on this guy. So kudos to you.
And Rob, your case is very interesting because if that's all they had on you, and his testimony can't be used, it's not like they could retry you.
Right.
And in theory, you have the right to a new trial.
Well, I think what's going to happen is, and this is just speculation, is that, they're going to look at the case and, they're going to see obviously that this conviction was made too egregiously and, open the case up and then, overturn it and throw it out.
I hope so.
I mean, at best.
I hope so.
And then send out sanctions. I don't know what that does, but I don't know. All I know is...
Well, hopefully he would lose his damn job. I hope he would lose his position, if not have to pay out something personally. Of course, they probably have qualified immunity, so he'll probably still be protected, even though what he did was
the cop didn't know that he couldn't lie to the court.
Yeah. But I have tried, to get the courts to talk to me. I mean, the last time I was there, y'all saw what the county attorney did. He photobombed me. Well,
he ran out the door as quickly as he could. I hope you'll keep us in the loop as this develops, Rob. God knows how many years it's going to take for you to get any semblance, if it even does pan out for you. And I hope it does. I hope that
they're probably going to try and drive it to a point where he's dead before it comes to a conclusion, because that's what they always do.
We're not getting any younger, that's for sure. Thank you, Rob, for the call tonight. Appreciate the update on that situation. That was, I think, Jim McLaughlin was that cop's name. And ugly situation. We don't know how many people are behind bars because of lies that this man told, or how many people have their lives and reputations ruined because of the lies this man told. And again, he built his entire career on telling lies, by pretending to be somebody he wasn't, to trick people into doing something that maybe they wouldn't have done otherwise. The number 603-283-6160. If you want to join us here, you can. You can bring up anything you want. This is Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. There's been a substantial crash in the value of sterling after the financial markets rejected a mini-budget presented by Britain's new Chancellor of the Exchequer. Kwasi Kwarteng unveiled plans for massive tax cuts to be funded by significant borrowing, with much of the benefit to be enjoyed by the wealthiest in Britain. The pound plummeted against the dollar and the FTSE lost 2% of its value. John Mills is a British businessman, economist, and entrepreneur.
I think it's a very high-risk strategy he's pursuing. Getting so much the taxation systems cancelled and using borrowed money to replace it, I think is a very high-risk strategy. For the sake of the country, I hope it doesn't work as badly as I fear it might. But I think we may be in for a rough ride.
And the Bank of England warned on Friday that the UK may already be in a recession. In other news today, US officials say Washington has been quietly warning Russia for months about the consequences if Vladimir Putin authorises a nuclear strike. It comes after the Russian leader threatened the possibility of using nuclear weapons in his war against Ukraine. From FSN's Washington Bureau, Nick Harper reports.
US officials say there's been several months of regular private communications with Moscow, all aimed at deterring President Putin from using nuclear weapons. Aides say that the Biden administration has been vague about the possible consequences, focusing instead on strategic ambiguity, but making it clear there would be a US response. President Putin has announced a mobilization to strengthen Russia's army following losses in Ukraine, but there are still fears the Kremlin is weighing up using nuclear weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Russia, meanwhile, began holding referenda in Ukrainian territories it continues to hold. It's hoping to prove the people there want to become part of the Russian Federation, but Western governments are dismissing the process as a sham. The foreign ministers of the US and China met today on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. From FSN's bureau at UN headquarters, Will Denzelo with more.
The two foreign ministers didn't respond to shouted questions as they sat down for talks. But US State Department spokesperson Ned Price says the meeting was a chance to maintain open lines of communication. Tensions have grown since House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan and President Biden's comments that the US would defend the island if attacked. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says the Taiwan question is now the biggest risk to US-China relations. William Denzelo, New York.
One other headline today, the writer Hilary Mantel has died at the age of 70. The author of the Wolf Hall trilogy, she won the Booker Prize twice. She suffered a stroke on Thursday, according to her publisher. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. Phones are open if you want to join in here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. It's Ian, Chris, and nobody here with you tonight. We ended up getting into Venezuela because we talked about the story with in regards to Martha's Vineyard and the immigrants that were shuttled up there, ostensibly from Florida. Turned out they were from San Antonio. The allegation is they were misled when it came to why they decided to go up there. And now they're in the hands of the state. So who knows what's going to end up happening to them. They certainly seem like people who could work, who are willing to work. It's just that they were essentially defrauded and told that there were things like jobs waiting for them in Martha's Vineyard, when, in point of fact, apparently Martha's Vineyard's people didn't want them to be there at all. It was a very interesting situation, and nobody did a good job at kind of recounting what had happened there. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that story?
Just that it's really, really interesting that yet again the libertarians are the only people who actually have some sympathy for the people involved, and what the Democrats and the Republicans are both interested in is how they can offload any responsibility they claim to feel about these people to somebody else.
By the way, Bitcoin.com is a place you can go to learn about cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. It's definitely an international technology that people everywhere ought to learn about, and you can do that by clicking Get Started at the top of the page, and that will help you understand the basics about crypto like Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Just head over there to Bitcoin.com and click Get Started. You can also get the latest news headlines over at news.bitcoin.com. But it turned out some of these migrants that were bussed up to or taken up to Martha's Vineyard were from Venezuela, and we haven't done an update on Venezuela. There's a reason why people want to get the F out of Venezuela, and that's because it is a socialist hellhole where for more than a decade plus they have been inflating the hell out of the Venezuelan bolivar, the currency there. And of course, well, we're starting to see what that's like here in the United States with government's own numbers, inflation rates looking at over 8%. Year to date.
Yeah, that's like their own numbers too, not the actual numbers.
Which is basically their numbers are calculated as being the biggest lie that they can tell without completely losing credibility to the gullible fools.
Yeah, I mean, and this is standard for the socialist, places like Venezuela, right? Cesspools. They have the real inflation rate, and then they have the
official numbers.
Yeah, the official numbers, and there's a black market exchange rate and everything.
Right, and we've been following that.
There are lies, there are damn lies, and then there are government statistics.
Yeah, we've been following those statistics for a while here on Free Talk Live and kind of talking about the news that's coming out of there, what people's stories are, and how difficult life has been. In the last year or two in Venezuela, things have kind of turned around a little bit, if you at least believe some of the reports coming out of there. And one of the reasons for that is because they allowed the economy to dollarize in Venezuela. So they've essentially stopped the hemorrhaging to some extent by allowing vendors, businesses there in Venezuela to advertise a dollar price for their items. Now, we all understand that.
Imagine attaching yourself to the U.S. dollar and having that be an improvement over what you had before.
Yeah.
That's just awful.
The disgusting thing about this is these socialist countries are literally just propping up the dollar as a as a result of this. The dollar shouldn't be worth anything, not anything compared to what it is right now. It's only worth more than it should be as a result of these other countries who have an even worse governments,
That's right.
not being able to maintain their own currency.
Essentially, the dollars.
That and the petrodollar, which is our government will kill you if you try to trade for oil and anything else.
Sure.
Right. And essentially having the dollar used in so many global economies, El Salvador, and there's other countries where they don't even have a central bank money. They use the dollar. And so having it out there in those other places essentially kind of socializes the inflation, if you will, right? So rather than focusing the inflation all in one geographic area, all in the United States, whenever they print money out, it steals value from all of those people all around the world that have the dollar. So it's a lot harder. They've got a lot more printing to do.
People who aren't even benefiting
even worse than that
from it.
Because the dollar was also the reserve currency of the world. So even though most currencies are not redeemable, the amount of wealth held by the government is an indication of how likely they are to destroy their currency now as opposed to later. So it gives the currency a certain amount of credibility, even though it's still you're trusting a politician and eventually he's going to screw you. But so the dollar. So massive amounts of dollars are held by a lot of governments in the world, which props up the value, the subjective value of their currency. And when those dollars turn out to be useless, it's like owning a piece of a mutual fund that has a worthless stock in it. The value of the mutual fund drops, maybe sometimes even faster than that of the stock itself.
Well, so what you're pointing out is that when the dollar crashes, it's going to send the entire world's economy, all these countries that have propped their systems on the dollar, into a tailspin.
That would be my prediction as an economist, but we really don't know exactly what will happen, because in all the history of mankind, we have never before been stupid enough to crawl into a trap like this. I mean, cavemen did not do anything this stupid, or we might not be here. So we've come a long way, baby.
News here from, Bloomberg. At 10:30 p.m., gamblers are already packing the slot machines at the casino. Bartenders offer free booze, dancers swing to merengue music, and bingo players compete for a $500 prize near the poker tables. At midnight in May, and on a Friday, one lucky player won a raffle for a $2,900 Yamaha motorcycle, then traded the keys for cash. It's Vegas with a Latin America twist. Not that long ago, gambling would have been illegal in Caracas, the bastion of the far left. Hugo Chavez, Venezuela's firebrand populist, socialist, by the way, leader, who died in 2013, banned casinos, saying they caused social decay, comparable to, quote, prostitution, addiction, and drug use, unquote. Well, those days are long gone, as is clear to anyone visiting Las Mercedes, the bustling neighborhood east of downtown Caracas that's home to the new Humboldt Casino. One lady says, during this past 10 years, we were missing a place like this where we could have fun. She is a real estate broker, and she headed over to the roulette wheel with her husband. More than 24 office towers are rising from the narrow lanes of Las Mercedes. On the ground floor of the Jalisco Tower, 15-story building, passers-by can marvel at 3 red Ferraris on display at a dealership. The 4-seater, the Portofino convertible, the cheapest one, retails for over $200,000, which equals the annual pay of 590 entry-level public employees in Venezuela. Across the street, an apartment building is under construction. A brochure advertises a rooftop pool, game salon, gym, and co-working space. Stores sell Hermes and Pronovias clothing around the corner, and not far away, a shop displays $1,000 stilettos from a lawn designer. This conspicuous consumption
Heels
represents...
or knives?
What's that?
Heels or knives?
I think heels.
Okay.
But I bet you there was a man with a knife and a gun protecting these stores. More coming up. Yeah, more
I wonder
coming up
what
here.
percentage of their customers work for the government.
Well, it's an interesting question, because they do say
stole
here...
all the money and then they didn't have anything to spend it on.
They do point out that the entry-level public employees don't make a whole lot in Venezuela. But there's more on the way here. I bet Maduro and his buddies are sitting pretty. In moments, we'll tell you more. Like, how is there this economic turnaround in Venezuela? Or is there? It's Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
It's written in legalese. If you don't have training in reading that crap, it might as well be a foreign language. And as you pointed out, it doesn't matter if you can read it.
I thought I had them dead to rights. And these bureaucrats, they just like, no, we do whatever we want here at the zoning board.
Yeah, that's right.
And you'll kiss our butts.
Peon, serf,
you'll
slave.
You'll do what we say.
Yeah. Why label them citizens?
Oh,
why not just call it what it is? You're a serf. You're a slave. We're the freest slaves in the world. If you don't like this slavery, you should go to some other country and be a slave. At least we got cell phones and TV and beer.
Do have beer.
Our masters let us live a pretty nice life. They let us keep 40% of what we earn.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
I've been told no in many different ways.
I give you an order and you're going to obey it.
Who told you you can go this way?
You can't do that and you have to leave here.
You cannot bring signs into the rally.
Walk with me. Well, I'm comfortable here, actually. Whoa. Hey. Who do you think you are? Excuse me.
There is no video and audio allowed in this office.
No, I have work today.
You ain't going to make it.
Wait a minute. Hey! Oh my God! Unbelievable! Why are you running from me? Because you scared me. What am I being detained for?
You're being served.
What is this?
You're being served.
What is this? Bureaucrats have a funny way of telling people no.
That's the sound of the men working on the chain.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
I'm a little obsessed with My Magic Mud. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, the founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I didn't even know my teeth were coffee stained. A week's worth of use convinced me, and now I use it every 3 or 4 days. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, and I think it cleans better, too. My Magic Mud's available at most local health food stores, Sprouts, Natural Grocers, CVS, Walmart's Natural Beauty Aisle, but I can get it for you for 20% off with coupon code FTL20 at MyMagicMud.com. FTL20 MyMagicMud.com.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, phones open, 603-283-6160 is the number. Ian, Chris, nobody here to continue the discussion about Venezuela and what may be the beginnings of an economic turnaround simply because the government let off a little bit. They backed away. They took their boot off of the throats of the Venezuelan people, just a smidgen. And it has made a difference for the people there. The story here is from Bloomberg, and it's a pretty detailed piece. I'm just going to share some of it with you, and then I'll post the full thing over on our social media page, which you can go to social.freetalklive.com. And you can follow us there. By the way, thanks to Robin Mock, who is a Free Talk Live supporter of our AMPS program. amps.freetalklive.com is where you can go to sign up, as Robin has done. Robin is a gold level supporter, helping us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live. You get access to some perks, some benefits. Just head over to amps.freetalklive.com. We definitely appreciate the support. So a little bit more here from the story. And again, I'll post this later over at social.freetalklive.com on the Free Talk Live profile if you want to dig in deeper. But they're talking about this like kind of ritzy area of Caracas called Las Mercedes with like Porsches or Ferraris for sale. And there's a casino that's open. Previously, casinos were prohibited. And they say here that this conspicuous consumption represents a remarkable turnaround. Still early, delicate, and available only to the wealthiest in the nation of 30 million. Until recently, Venezuela was known as an economic basket case with hyperinflation that neared 2 million% per year. Its currency, the bolivar, was worth so little that criminals no longer bothered to steal it, and enterprising souls wove the bills into handicrafts to sell to tourists for a few US dollars. And if you want to, you can go on eBay and look for bolivar purse or bolivar wallet, and you can actually buy things that are made of the bolivar. That's what they're talking about.
Wow.
Yeah, around Las Mercedes.
I'm not made of money, you know.
Somebody would make a shirt out of bolivars for you, though, if you paid them enough. The stores shut down around Las Mercedes, and children were foraging for food in garbage bags. The neighborhood's transformation follows a stunning about-face by President Maduro, the barrel-chested former vice president handpicked by Chavez. Over the past 3 years, Maduro has eased restrictions on businesses, as well as price controls and regulations. Notice, he didn't get rid of price controls and regulations. He eased them. Last year, he dropped the ban on casinos entirely, apparently. And most significantly, in late 2018, Maduro let the U.S. dollar circulate legally. So we had reported on this a couple years ago on Free Talk Live because it was pretty noteworthy. It used to be illegal for vendors to have dollar prices. And then they changed the policy to where the dollar is still not legal to put into a bank account. Like, you can't do that in Venezuela, but if you want to accept it, you're allowed to. They're not going to arrest you for it anymore. And everyone, from executives to street vendors, now carries greenbacks, which could have led to jail time under Chavez. Dollarization helped out a lot, said the general manager of the Las Mercedes Power Store, PAW3R is how that's spelled, whose bright and sporty shirts and leggings are Venezuela's answer to Lululemon. I don't know what that is. She remembers how she and her 7 employees struggled to keep up with the rising prices. With inflation under control, her business is thriving. Now, of course, again, they're still subject to the U.S. inflation, but it's nowhere near.
I'm wondering how they're getting dollars, just because
family members sending them down there.
I mean, yeah, interesting. So, what were they doing before? They were just they were
there. You just weren't allowed to have them. Dollars were absolutely being bought and sold for bolivar. That's how they came up with the black market rates for bolivar, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm just trying to think like how this would have somehow improved the situation, just because people were using it because they had no other choice already anyway.
But they can now use it openly.
Yeah, the business becomes inefficient when you make it illegal. Drugs would be a lot cheaper if it wasn't for the war on drugs.
Exactly. So now businesses can advertise dollar prices. They can accept dollars without having fear of a sting operation and spending the rest of their life in prison. And so that makes it a lot easier to just get business done.
Even though they were doing it before. I mean, not the advertising, but the at least acceptance of, presumably.
I don't know how obvious it was. They probably would be very suspicious of a customer coming in offering dollars, thinking it was an undercover operation trying to arrest them.
So they were like converting it behind the scenes and then on the black market, and then
correct.
Paying
people were doing black market conversions.
So that
of the
creates
dollar.
inefficiency in the system.
Gringos were coming in, for instance, bringing dollars in, exchanging them for the Venezuelan bolivar, which they would have been insane to do on the legal market because they would get like 10 to 1,
right.
Whereas on the black market they might get 100,000 for one. So there was definitely a high demand.
Basically, what they've had to do in order to do this is abandon the lie that anything was wrong with the market price of bolivars. They had, I assume, because that was their big lie, that the Bolivar is really worth more than this. It's just somehow speculators can consistently turn a profit by betting wrong, which I don't know how that even works.
And did they abandon the lie, or did they just, change the law to allow dollars?
I don't even know if they changed the law. I think they just allowed it. I don't know how official I don't know how official it was. Maybe it has become official now at 4 years on.
They're just not cracking down on people.
But the other thing you have to remember, Chris, is if you were a business owner, and you are a business owner, but you don't have an office in Venezuela. But if you were in Venezuela and you needed to order, a pallet of wireless modems or something like that, you own ThinkPenguin.com. People can get Linux-based computing solutions there. Your vendor would not take the Bolivar.
No.
Whoever it was your wholesaler was, he'd laugh in your face if you tried to give him a pallet full of bills or whatever, right, to trade him for whatever the product was that you needed. So in order to buy from international sellers, you had to pay in euro or you had to pay in dollars. And that's a problem when paying in dollars and euro is illegal. Right, so it makes business very difficult to do. You're going to go out of business.
Yeah, there's a third one, actually, Bitcoin. Bitcoin does actually work in a lot of cases.
If you had somebody who's willing to take it, and we know that not all sellers are yet.
There's more international use of Bitcoin, I think, than a lot of people realize. It's not like substantial by comparison to like the dollar or maybe the euro, but it's more than people think. Let's just put it that way. It happens like all the time.
Almost every data point shows the economy is improving. The country's gross domestic product is expanding anywhere from 1.5% to 20%, depending on which economist is forecasting. Hyperinflation officially came to a halt back in January, which is very interesting. So they are still inflating, by the way. I did check dollartoday.com. They most recently they've changed the iteration of the Bolivar a few times in just the last decades. They've knocked zeros off the end of their official currency, and the last time they did that, they changed it to what they're calling, I believe, the digital Bolivar, which doesn't make any sense, but that's just what they called it. And the hyperinflation just slowed to a crawl. It's still going up. It was like 4 and change, 5 Bolivar per dollar on the black market like a year ago, and it is now 8.4. So it's still gone up 100% in a year, but that's still way better than 2 million percent or whatever.
It's no longer at hyperinflation.
Yeah. Let's go to Jack. He's in Washington State. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, that's not Jack. Jack is in Washington State. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I thought I was listening. I had all kinds of things I was going to say, but I got cut off a bunch. But Beer Talk Live is awesome. I thought I was watching it for the first 45 minutes of the show, so I got a little confused.
Just check your watch. If it's it's not past 10:30 Eastern time on Saturday night, it's not time for Beard Talk Live. And thanks for the reminder, Jack. I did mean to plug that tonight. Tune in tomorrow night. It's 10:30 Eastern time is when they start. Roughly. There were some technical difficulties last week that was a little bit later.
Nobody's still there?
Yeah, he's here. I think.
There's still nobody?
Great job. Yeah, he just does a great job on that show.
Oh, actually, apparently we've lost him. He dropped out. I don't know what happened there.
Seems surprising.
Maybe he's having internet. Maybe having internet difficulties
but
there.
I think it's DeSantis, that devil you talk about. I think he's just making a point because the media doesn't cover immigration very well. So by him saying 50, not 500, 50, he's kind of getting the media involved in resource issues. Plus, minuses, black and red. He can't support them down there, regardless of crime and your ideal of immigration. Does that make sense, or your ideas on immigration?
Well, the government shouldn't have to support immigration. They should just simply allow it so people can come here and make a better life for themselves by working hard. And by the way, whenever you talk to people that have worked with Hispanic migrants from south of the border, they will tell you they are the hardest working people they've ever encountered. To work hard and provide for their families, they should be free to do that. If there's a place that's willing to hire them and there's a place that's willing to put them up, then in a free country, you should be able to do that. Out of time. Tomorrow night. We'll see you then. freetalklive.com.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn